In the year 2007, Jeff Kinney released a book called Diary of a Wimpy Kid. This book ended up being a huge success and would go on to become a series, and in 2010 would be adapted into a live-action movie. It's safe to say that these books were a major part of my life growing up, being a kid who loved to read, and I owned every single one of them, always making sure to buy the newest one when it released. So naturally, of course, I ended up watching the 3 live-action movies as well, starring Zachary Gordon as Greg Heffley. I adored the books and these movies so much when I was younger, so I thought, hey, why not take a trip down memory lane and give them a rewatch? So yeah, that's why I'm making this video right now. I'll talk about each movie one by one and give my thoughts. I've also decided I'll take into account how these movies do as adaptations to the books, so after some quick rereads I sat down and started off with The first Diary of a Wimpy Kid follows the story of Greg Heffley, a 6th grader who's about to start his first year of middle school. And wow, let me just say it right now, but I did not remember Greg being so small. What on earth, he's so tiny and underdeveloped here, it's actually kinda jarring. Anyway, this movie mainly focuses on Greg and his best friend Rowley's relationship, with Greg being so obsessed with keeping a good self-image that he selfishly discards Rowley's feelings. A lot of complaints people seem to have with this one is that Greg is just a huge prick, and to be honest, for the most part I agree. He does so much mean stuff to Rowley, and while he does have an arc at the end where he finally does something selfless to protect Rowley, it doesn't really feel like he gets that much payback for a lot of stuff he does. I mean, sure, bad stuff happens to Greg, and when it's done really well, so that it's either because of his own actions or doesn't feel too over the top. But there's still just a feeling that maybe he got off a bit too easy. Luckily, this doesn't get in the way of the movie's enjoyment too much, because it's still pretty fantastic. The jokes land really well, and I was laughing quite a bit throughout. The way the cheese is presented as some hyped up evil being is so funny to me now, because now I see all the kids take some piece of mouldy cheese way too seriously, whereas when I was younger I remember fully sympathising with them. Quick side note, but Chirag's actor is so great, I love him. His entire character is basically just for exposition, but he makes it so entertaining. His monologue about the cheese is honestly one of the highlights of the film. I'll come out and say it though, these movies aren't the best adaptations of the book. I mean, they did a great job. Turning a book, which is basically a sequence of funny events, into a movie with an overarching plot and arc isn't an easy task, and they certainly did it in the best way possible. But the characters are pretty different to their book counterparts. To be fair, Greg is done well, although in the book he's presented as an even bigger arsehole than in the movies, rarely learning from his lessons at all. But obviously this wouldn't really work for a feature film, hence why his character is slightly altered. Susan and Rowley are also done pretty well, but Rodrick and Frank are actually really different to how they are in the books. I say different instead of worse for a reason which I'll get to in a bit. Rodrick in the books is pretty much just lazy and kinda blunt with a can't be bothered attitude. But in the movie, he's just manically obsessed with his band, ruining Greg's life and trying to get girls. Also in the book, Frank Heffley is portrayed as a parent who finds his kids as an inconvenience, who leaves parenting to his wife and tries to stay out of everything so he can work on his Civil War figurines. But in the movies, he's become this insane lunatic who struggles with being a parent so much he does wacky and weird things in the process. But while these characters may not be adapted perfectly, they really stand out as some of the most unique and hilarious characters in the films, and in a way suit these actors even more. I think that's why I think that while this movie isn't the greatest adaptation, and certainly has some issues, it's an all-round funny and entertaining experience that I still recommend. But anyway, I think it's about time to move on to... Yeah, this is the best one of the trilogy. This movie fucking slaps. Remember when I said I didn't like how Greg kind of got away with being an arsehole in the last one? Well, in this one, the Greg suffering is turned up to 11. Like, I'm serious, this kid goes through so much shit here. Honestly, you can't help feel bad for him. Not only that, but he does 2 selfless acts here. Helping out Rowley with his talent show, even though it will completely embarrass him, and getting Rodrick's band to play in the talent show. I mean, 6th grade Greg could never. On that note, this movie takes place exactly 1 year after the last one, being the start of the 7th grade for Greg. This time though, instead of focusing on the relationship between Greg and Rowley, we focus on the relationship between Greg and his brother, Rodrick. Devin Bostick shines so well here. It was such a good choice to make him one of the primary characters because he steals the show. He's consistently funny. I mean, the DORE joke, it always hits. And him and Greg bashing heads is something I could watch all day. That's what this movie mostly follows, showing their toxic relationship at the beginning, to them learning to get along and eventually finding they enjoy each other's company, then arguing and splitting up, before finally reconciling after Greg selflessly helps Rodrick out at the end. This structure works well, but it's paced slightly questionably as they try to cram in scenes from the book. Luckily, the humour once again lands so well, which makes these scenes still enjoyable to watch, and it means the pacing can be largely ignored. Oh yeah, this movie also gets some good emotional bits in there too. I mean, Rodrick saying, "You may be my brother, but you'll never be my friend." Chills. Chills. I could gush about this movie for ages, but I think it's about time to talk about the final movie of the trilogy. In the third and final installment of the trilogy, we see Greg leaving 7th grade for his summer break, and what the fuck happened? Did he age like 3 years? What? It's so weird seeing Greg look basically identical in the first two, then hitting puberty in the third. It's not even like the third one was made ages later either, it was literally made the year after the last one. Anyway, in this one we focus on Greg's relationship with his father, Frank, and much like the last, another actor finally shines here, this time being Greg's dad, Frank, played by Steve Zahn. Remember how I said he's like a wackier version of Frank from the books? Well yeah, in this movie he just pumps that shit up like it's nobody's business and goes completely off the rails. This certainly makes for some funny moments, but he also manages to balance it with some good emotion when he needs to, especially when Frank and Greg are in the hotel room and he tells him he's not going to send Greg away to the military school. It's just really nice, I like it. I should also probably explain the plot real quick too. In this film, Greg wants to spend his summer playing video games and trying to get together with Holly Hills, Greg's main love interest of the trilogy. But unfortunately, his dad gets in the way of that and they continually butt heads until Greg finds out his dad may try to send him to military school, so he tries to impress him until they finally reconcile at the end. I do like this plot. We also get to see a good amount of Rodrick, which is always a great thing, and Rowley's family are a good way to add in some great awkward humour. If I was to complain about this movie though, it would have to be that it does have some 2010 summer vacation movie tropes, especially with the song choices. That really took me back. And also the humour does lack compared to the last. That's not to say this isn't a great one though, and overall I would say it's a really pleasant end to the trilogy. So in conclusion, I have to say that I'm glad I got to revisit these movies and find that they still pretty much hold up today. I got some good laughs and an even greater appreciation for them in some aspects. However, it is crucial to highlight the fact that they aren't the best adaptations, with the books certainly capturing the humour better and probably the best portrayal of the Heffleys in my opinion. Still though, I would 100% recommend these movies as something enjoyable for the whole family, and they hardly feel dated at all. But anyway, huge thanks for watching and goodbye. Wait, what? I thought this video was over. So, after I watched the original trilogy, I thought I should probably check out the infamous Die of a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul, which came out years after the originals and contained an entirely new cast. Before I start releasing my frustrations around this movie, I think I should first give some context. While most people assume this movie was an unplanned cash grab simply made as a way to farm more money off the huge brand that is Die of a Wimpy Kid, intellectuals like myself who have read the movie diary, which details what it was like behind the scenes of the original trilogy, and as a side note I really recommend reading it, it's super interesting and actually one of the things which got me into film, but that's a topic for another time. And in this book, Jeff Kinney states that if they were to make another film in the future, he would like to make it based off the book The Long Haul, and goes on to further state that all the actors would need to be replaced as they're much too old now. I just wanted to clear that up real quick because I think these criticisms of this movie's existence being lazily pulled out of nothing for money to be pretty unfair. But yeah, that's about the extent I can defend this movie because it's a steaming pile of dog shit. This film managed to successfully ruin every single thing the original trilogy had going for it. Remember how the original trilogy was funny and managed to maintain the humour of the original books? Well, bye-bye comedy. Remember how the original trilogy had characters which were funny, interesting, and felt like a real family? Well, here comes The Long Haul with characters that are completely unrecognisable and are less interesting than a wet napkin. Meet Father. He's a father who likes work stuff. And his children, I think. Say hello to Gurg. His personality is idolising fat Markiplier and being as cringeworthy and unrelatable as possible. And finally, meet skinny Keanu Reeves. He's a teenager and he dislikes his brother, I think. So yeah, that being said, they managed to completely butcher every single character. So much so they are absolutely nothing like the previous movie counterparts or even the books themselves. Not to mention this family has zero chemistry at all. They feel so uncomfortable around each other, it's just painful to watch. Compared to the last movie's characters, which felt like a real family that meshed so well, it's such a downgrade. Another huge issue this movie seems to have is it feels so goddamn out of touch. Like, Greg being obsessed with the YouTuber was sort of okay for 2017, I guess, but it still comes off as so infuriatingly cringeworthy and forced. I hate it. These writers clearly don't understand anything about gaming YouTubers at all, and it shows. Also, for some reason, to kick off this stupid plot, Greg becomes this May called Diaper Hands, which literally looks something straight out of 2010 and yet again demonstrates how horribly out of touch these writers are. Going back to the topic of the comedy, every single joke falls absolutely flat in this movie. I didn't once crack a smile. The original book is filled with plenty of jokes which could have worked well, but this movie manages to destroy every single one of them as it tries to be a family road trip movie, which all the kiddies can get all excited over. This attempt to be as kiddie humour oriented as possible is continued throughout, shown by this movie's obsession with poo, pee and sick jokes, which is all cheap, gross out humour done to attempt to force a laugh out of the children watching. And oh my god, don't get me started on the plot. As I said before, it's no easy task turning a series of funny events into a feature film with arcs and a nice ending. But unlike the former movies, this one manages to completely ruin it. They try to make the villains this family called the Beardos, who just change from a strange family to huge assholes and then to literal criminals who rob the Heffley family. Remember how in the original trilogy, Greg had an arc in each movie where he learned to get on with a different character and be less selfish? Well, in this one, Greg doesn't really learn anything. I think his mum learned she should be less controlling of her kids or something. But ultimately, it feels like nothing was really achieved here. And in an attempt to combat this, the movie has this whole quest to get to Grandma's house, which ends with Greg riding a boat downhill and, whoa, look, he landed in the pool and is somehow uninjured. Ain't that so wacky and memorable, guys? Get this, the touching ending they expected the audiences to cry at was Manny reuniting with his pig whom he had basically no bond with. Well, fucking Count on Me by Bruno Mars plays. I know I'm not making this up, this is the emotional climax of the film. To wrap this up though, Die with a Wimpy Kid, The Long Haul is an absolute insult to the original trilogy and especially the books. An utter cringe fest which solidly takes the place of the fourth worst film I've ever had the pleasure of seeing. Whatever you're expecting out of this thing, I can promise it's worse. I sincerely hope they never try this again, but who knows what they'll do. At least I got to rewatch the original trilogy again and take a trip down memory lane, even if it was sad with the long haul at the end. But yeah, I just wanted to rewatch and finally talk about these movies, to be honest. Huge thanks for sticking around. I'm sorry I haven't been uploading as much recently. While there's plenty of reasons, such as the fact I haven't been home for a month, if I'm honest, the only reason I haven't is just because I haven't really had any video ideas. Nothing really stuck out to me that much, apart from some big projects which I don't really feel like I could take on right now. Perhaps soon you might get to see one of them if I get around to it, but for the moment it'll just be making shorter videos like these when I get the inspiration. But anyway, that's been it. Bye!